Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted people in my network, friends, colleagues, growing network, anybody that I can meet that has a great story to tell or is doing great and impactful work. I consider these people to be great leads based on the work they're doing, the message that they're getting out there. And I want to learn about the books that have impacted them. I want to know which books have contributed more to who they are as a person, leader, family member, in a relationship, their role in a relationship. I think the series has evolved so much. So I want to get to those books that have really left that impact on my guests. I cover three types of categories of books in this series, where the first book is one they're telling me about that I haven't read. The second book, where we've both read it, whether specifically for the series or we've read it in our past lives. And then the third category is where I interview the author and or publisher of the book. So in this particular episode, my guest is going to be Greg Kettner. And Greg is a TEDx keynote speaker, trainer, and coach who uses the WorkHappy program to assist leaders and organizations in reducing stress, boosting productivity, and fostering a culture of mental health mindfulness. In his talk, The Power of Laughter, he shares how businesses can inspire and empower their workforce by putting people before profits. Work happy businesses succeed by ensuring that voices are heard, opinions and perspectives are valued, and that discussions about mental health take place in the workplace. Coca-Cola, Remax, Ford Motor Company, iSims, Traction Quest, Visner, Sun Life Financial, and the Vancouver 2010 Winter Olympic Games are just a few of the companies that now work happy. And I was introduced to Greg by a previous guest, Darren Tully. Darren had been on my episode 21, where we had covered his book, Live Your Possible, Ignite Your Happy, Authentic Self, and Live a Fulfilling Life Rooted in Joy, Inclusion, Love, and Possibilities. It is no surprise the way I've been introduced to other guests and referred to other guests by former guests. It's no surprise that these people, these sets of people, run in these very specific sets of circles where it's just kind of about awe, finding wonder in life, just finding the best in life, doing the best in your work, and just kind of spreading that message of joy, wonder, laughter. So I'm excited again to bring that kind of energy to the conversation by having Greg on. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks, John. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation.
So, why don't you tell me a little bit about? I read your bio, obviously very brief, doesn't really shine a light on the entirety of your work, but just so before we jump into the book and our conversation, why don't you tell me a little bit more about the work that you do in the day to day? What does that look like?
Day to day, it varies, just depending on who I'm talking to and what speaking engagements or training or coaching. But basically, I got into this whole work happy. Lost my job at the beginning of COVID. I was director of sales, and my manager told me I was non-essential. I countered with, "I think you're non-essential," but he won the argument. And so I've I've been in sales for 27 years. I sold professional sports. I sold software. Worked with some startups, and just really enjoy people and being happy and positive. And when this came through, I was talking to my wife, and I said, I don't know what to do or where to go. I mean, we're going into the unknown, and I thought it was maybe a month and things will turn around. Here we are 3 years later. Um, and so we just had a conversation, and she said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, in my former life, I did stand up comedy, used to tour around headline clubs and that kind of thing. I said, I would love to get back on stage. But when you're married, you can't be on the road 300 nights a year. You can't have a solid relationship. And I've got a stepdaughter and all that. And she said, well, why don't you go and help other people work happy? You're always positive. You always look on the bright side of life. You have the ability to make people laugh. And so I just started doing some research and found in my own life that it started to become a struggle during COVID, right? The overwhelm, the loneliness, all this. And I'm like, how can I help people? And, I went on LinkedIn and I did some Google searches, and there weren't really a lot of people talking about that.
Mhm.
And so I've just, over the last 3 years, just by working with people, researching, taking classes, my own experience, talking to people like you, um, it's just been great because every day I have conversations with people who are struggling with their brain health, whether it's mild, I don't feel like getting up and going to the home office, to severe depression, all sorts of things. And I'm not a clinician, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a doctor, but I have the ability to connect with people, have a conversation, and have empathy. And when they say, "Well, what do you do?" and I'm like, "Well, I've gone to counseling. Have you thought of that? Have you talked to your doctor? Have you talked to your spouse? Have you talked to your kids?" Right? And just knowing someone's there and talking and listening and helping someone else is just it's so rewarding. I mean, I've had great jobs, I've had horrible jobs, but what I do now, John, is every day conversations about how do we work happy, how do we take care of our mental health, how do we be better people for ourselves, for our community, and for our world. So it's pretty lucky.
And Greg, as kind of an overview, just to get a sense of the work itself, your program, Work Happy, what does that look like? Um,
What
whether
is
whether it is on stage presenting and or in the classroom or workshops, what does the program look like?
Yeah, so the three things I really do, John, is the keynoting, whether it's a conference or, I'll come into your company. I do a laugh and learn, a half hour of fun stories with life lessons that's not too serious, not too mental health. And then I have the Work Happy game plan. I'm a big sports fan, as you might be able to tell with my Gretzky jersey. But it's a 9-step program on how do we go from stress to self care? How do we go from loneliness back to community, and from unproductive to productive? So 9 different steps, and it's not rocket science. But I've created a workshop, if you will, where we can go in. We talk about all these different things that we can do personally, whether you're an employee or a leader, to show the empathy, to show how to talk about mental health. And then we have group coaching along with that. And then I do one-on-one coaching as well too. There's a lot of people, I have a great job and I'm too stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm not as happy as I want to be. How do I use humor in the workplace? That's HR approved. So those are kind of the 3 lanes that I work with. But all in all, like you read in the bio, it's how do we put people before profits? Because if we put our people first, we give them patterns on how to be well, physically and mentally, and then the profits are going to follow.
Greg, and then when I speak to my guests, I also ask about their upbringing. So, what did around the time where you would have, I don't know, left high school or school to kind of figure out what you were going to do with your career? What did that look like? What did the path to now look like? Because I'm just always curious what it is that creates or facilitates, yeah, facilitates just from all the various experience, what it is
Yeah,
that gets to the person that's sitting in front of me. So, what did that look like, that initiation onto whatever path it is you took?
yeah. Well, out of college, I got a job the day after college. I went out and interviewed at Nike Town in Seattle. It was just brand new, and I wanted to work up my way up in Nike. They had a hockey division back in the day, and so that was my dream job coming out of college. And it was a good job. It was a good starting job out of college, but I just found that there wasn't the way they did things, and it was all about profit and grinding people, and the way they treated the people who made the shoes and the upmarket and all that. And I'm just like, you know what? Nike is nice, big, and shiny, but it wasn't purposeful for me.
Mm.
And so from there, I got into sports. I started doing sales for the local junior hockey team in Seattle, and worked my way up there in sales, selling tickets and sponsorship. And then I got an opportunity to go to the National Hockey League, do the same thing, which was probably my favorite job. I loved hockey. I grew up in Canada, and every day I got to talk to people about hockey, and I got paid well for doing it. Um, but then we got to the point with the team where I mean, you play in a stadium and you only have so many tickets that you can sell. And so we took the season ticket base. I think it was about 7,000 up to 14 in 2.5 years. Um, it was a great sales team, but we also had a good product on the ice at the time. Um, and so we got to the point where we didn't need 22 salespeople. And
Mhm.
so they cut it down to 10. And I'm the kind of, I'm a, I guess, a hunter. So I go out. I'm better building relationships, going out talking to people versus just picking up the phone and taking orders. And when people are renewing, that's all you need. So I moved on, went to Major League Soccer, Vancouver Whitecaps, managed a team for a while, which was great. But I learned that I'm not passionate about babysitting adults. I don't know. I don't know if you've had jobs like that before, but just hey, can you show up on time? Can you do what is expected? Because we're giving you a paycheck. And so from there, I just kind of worked at various sales jobs, building my career, building my network. And then I think where this whole happiness and work happy really started was I was working for a software company in Vancouver, and every year they had their annual sales kickoff. So 4,000 salespeople and technicians from around North America. We go to Vegas for a week for sales kickoff. There'd be training, networking, learning, obviously entertainment. We'll leave it at that. But it was a lot of fun, and the biggest event every year was their awards banquet, which was huge. I mean, you have 4,000 people at the Bellagio. The house band is Lenny Kravitz, and the
Nice.
top sales rep got a brand new Porsche every year. So I mean, it was a pretty decent budget. Um, and the one year I was there, they had hired a well-known stand-up comedian to get up there, and he wasn't doing so well. And typically, as a comedian, I've done this before. When the crowd's not into you, you go to your best joke. And he thought his best joke was his best joke, but it was something very offensive in front of 4,000 people about the first person who came out to present. And they shut the event down 7 minutes into a 3 hour program.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that really sucks. I would hate to follow that guy. Well, long story short, they paged me over the PA system in this room of 4,000 people, said, hey, if anyone knows where Greg is sitting, or if he's out gambling or at his hotel room, whatever, we need to talk to him right now. So I went backstage, and they said, hey, we need you to go up and give us 15 minutes of stand up so we can figure out what we're going to do.
They
And
put
I
out like
was
the
like,
bat signal, like
right? And I was like, and when they called me out, I was at the back of the room, and my first thought was, I'm getting fired. I was like, how much did I drink last night? Who was I talking to? Right? Totally thought. I'm like, why are you calling me out? Right? Because I'd been doing stand up for about 6 months.
yeah.
So at max, I had 5, 10 minutes of fart and poop jokes. Um, and so I went out there, and I didn't really know what I was going to say. I was so rattled I couldn't remember my name or my jokes. And I just went out and talked to him just one on one. Said, "Hey, I'm the guy, and let's have some fun." And I just kind of talked about the first 3 days that we were there. And then at the end of it, that year, if you hit your sales number and beyond, you got to go to President's Club, which was a $10,000 cruise through Turkey, Italy, and Greece. And you could take a friend. And that year, I was not going to hit my number. I was nowhere close to getting on the boat. But in front of 4,000 people, why not ask? And so I said, I didn't hit my number, but I'm kind of helping out the company right now. Can I get on the boat? And this guy steps up and says, kid, you're on the boat, happen to be the president of SAP.
Wow.
And so I joke now that I did 15 minutes of stand up in Vegas for a $10,000 trip, which is 40 grand an hour. And then 2 weeks later, I was back in Vancouver working for a burger and a beer.
That's amazing though. Wait, so did you find out how they just another one of my tangents. Did you find out how they got your name and paged you over the system to come up on stage? Did you ever find out who put that in motion?
Yeah, no, it was a friend of mine, and we're still friends. Steve Lucas. He was a VP at the time. Now he's CEO at Boomi. He was also CEO at Icems as well too. But he had heard me do stand up in Vancouver. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I had
Yeah.
some music in my ear for some reason. So he heard me, and he said, he goes, well, I saw this guy in Vancouver. He seems really funny. Let's bring him up, right? Not knowing that even if they had asked me, I think if they had asked me a week before, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I was just so rattled and going, you know what? I'm in Vegas. It's a sold out crowd. I'm never going to have this opportunity. So it was all about me. I just wanted the fame and glory, right?
Oh,
But
absolutely.
walking off the stage, I thought, you know what? If I could make money doing this, that would be awesome because I don't have to sell software. I don't have to talk to people who don't want my product, but everybody likes to laugh. And so that was, probably about 12 years ago. And so ever since then, I kind of transitioned from doing, stand up comedy in a club to, going to a Rotary and saying, hey, we need to laugh more. Right.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of evolved. And then when COVID hit, and I didn't have a job. And Becky's like, well, why don't you help other people work happy? I was like, okay, how do I transition? And now I've taken my 27 years of what I've learned, all the research I've done, and just built a nice little niche where, I get to talk to people all over, well, now all over the world, right? I'm international because of Zoom.
Look at you. Yeah, yeah. Technically, it counts. It counts. Don't
Technically.
short yourself.
But, every time I talk, whether it's a group coaching session or a keynote. I was just out in Boston talking to a group of software sales guys, um, and it was just amazing because the keynote was great, and then we had dinner, and afterwards we're in the bar in the hotel lobby, and I had no less than three guys come up to me and say, "Hey, thank you for talking about mental health. I'm struggling with it. How do I talk to my HR person?" Right. So, I gave the keynote at 9 in the morning. Now it's 9, 10 o'clock at night, and people are, especially guys, are having conversations. How do I talk about it? How do I reach out? And that's what motivates me. That's what gets me up every day when I can have a conversation with a dude. And now, I would never. I mean, I'm a loving guy, and I have great people in my life, but I would never tell a dude I love him, right? But through this whole COVID thing, right? I'll finish a conversation with a buddy. I'm like, hey, how's your headspace? I love you, man. I appreciate you. If you need anything, let me know.
Yeah.
And it's so refreshing to have guys that I can talk to, you know, about
Yeah.
what's going on between my ears.
Yeah, I can't say enough about just that ability, just that, I guess, permission for men. Just no one has to grant it, but I think we all grew up with this impression that we couldn't talk about it. Maybe the older generation put it in our head or said it blatantly or keep it to
Yeah,
yourself or don't cry or whatever it might be. I think we've all heard it all. But it's great that from that generation, even just one generation where my dad was pretty stoic about his feelings. God
yeah,
knows what was in his head. I talked to another guest on this podcast about we grew up together and we talked about how there was, alcoholism in our families amongst the
yeah,
men, like uncles and cousins of uncles and my dad's cousin. And we thought, it's not the main reason, but you wonder, was it triggered by that inability for men to express themselves? So
yeah,
anytime we are, quote, allowed to or encouraged to. I don't take that lightly because I think it's huge. I had my own issues during the pandemic, much to the
yeah,
same kind of thing that you mentioned that you found a lot of men were suffering during the pandemic. So it really, I think it's always been there, but the pandemic amplified it. So maybe before I was kind of functioning with it, but the pandemic with that coming up. Limiting who you
amplified
could
it.
talk to, who you could see, it just kind of brought things to the surface. So I appreciate that component of what you express with, share with, and allow men to kind of share with you in that process.
Yeah. No, it's been rewarding to hear the stories, but it's also helped me as well too. Like I never went through, I've never been through severe depression. Always been a happy-go-lucky guy, but there's been plenty of days, in
Hmm.
the last 3 years, where I was just like, oh my God, another day. I have to sit
Yeah.
here and watch my neighbor walk his dog again,
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And so it was starting to take a toll on me. I'm like, well, how, if I can't teach other people what to do if I'm not doing it myself. So I really dove into it and I learned a lot about mental health. I learned about how to talk about mental health. I learned, and now I practice meditation every day. I do breathing exercises. I mean, we're talking about reading. I've read more in the last 3 years than I have in my whole life, probably,
Yeah.
because that's one way instead of, going and having a beer and watching a hockey game. I'm enjoying reading a book, right, and sipping on a glass of water. It's healthier for my body. It's healthier for my mind, and I'm learning. And when I
Yeah.
learn, I can help other people.
Yep. Check, check, check. I think that's
Yeah,
why I've read so much during the pandemic. You just kind of, it's a bit of an escape from yourself. It kind of helps you focus on something, all the reasons that you just outlined. Greg, what did you, and I'm curious, just to take even a step back further, what did you go to college for?
I went to college for business. Well, when I started college, I wanted to be Billy Joel.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
Right? But I had the passion, but I just didn't have the talent. I mean, to get to that level or even to get a record out, like you have to have good luck, hard work, but you also have to have talent, right? Like
Okay,
I
so wait,
practiced,
what are we talking
practiced.
about? You play piano or something else?
Oh yeah, piano. So
Oh,
I
okay.
grew up taking piano lessons, but I could never. I could hear the melody, but I couldn't get the left hand to go with the right hand, right? And so I got to college, and you know, you learn music theory, and that supposedly is supposed to help you do
Supposedly.
that.
I paid for it thinking I was gonna get it. Yeah, I didn't get it.
Right? But I struggled, and there was a good friend of mine at the time, Sean Kavanagh, who was just a genius. Right? He could listen to a song and just recreate it just by memory or by ear or whatnot. So he helped me a lot with the theory, but it didn't stick. And then my teacher made fun of me at the end of the quarter, and I got up, and you're 19 and you're a hothead. I said, what, screw you, I'm out of here, and went to the ad building and decided to go into business. And then that's when I was like, okay, I want to work in the sports world, which I did get to. I was at Nike and the Vancouver Canucks and the Vancouver Whitecaps. So that's kind of my
Yeah,
journey, but
Greg.
definitely changed from day one in college.
Yeah, I mean, I think for so many people it does. Have you? I'm assuming you've had a chance to see Billy in a concert.
Yep. One of my favorite stories when I was working in Seattle for the hockey team, our offices weren't in the stadium; it was in Key Arena, the old Key Arena, and but we would get a printout, right, because our hockey team played there, so we got a schedule when a concert would come to town, and typically the day before a concert or early in the morning they would have a sound check. So I found out when the sound check was, and then told everybody I had a meeting downtown between 10 and 12 because that's when the sound check was. So I went down to the stadium, and I was, if anybody's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm getting some stuff for work." Um, White lies. And so he came out on stage, and he started tinkering around and stuff, and there was a group of probably 8 or 10 of us like, just kind of gathered around the front of the stage, right? I mean, there's, I don't know, whatever the pit is, 10 feet in between.
Wait, there's a pit at a Billy Joel concert.
Well, between the stage and the
Yeah,
the,
yeah, I
the
got you. I
fence or
got. You. I
whatever.
just
Yeah, there
pictured
wasn't a.
people moshing to Downeaster Alexa.
Well, you are a fan if you know Down Easter
Oh my
Alexis.
God, yeah, no, I've seen him in concert. That's why I asked. Just he's just an
Yeah,
incredible performer. There's some artists that go on stage and they just kind of play the music and that's that. But man, you sit there for a Billy concert and it's like you're in his fucking living room. Like
yeah,
he knows how to talk to
absolutely.
the audience. He's just that's a craft is where you don't get so lost in your fame that you can talk to people as if you're just, at somebody's house and just going through a catalog of great music.
Yeah. No, he's great, and so we're down there, and he's doing sound check, and there's about 8 or 10 of us around the stage, and he stops and he goes, "So what songs do you guys want to hear?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "Scenes from an Italian Restaurant." And he goes, "All right, what's your name?" I go, "Greg." He goes, "It's a long song, so I'll just play the first 3 or 4 minutes." Right? But he did.
Yeah.
The band did a sound check playing my favorite song. And then the guy next to me, he's like, "What's your name?" And I don't know, it's Hank or whatever. He goes, "I'm an Elvis fan." He goes, "What Elvis song do you want to hear?" And he took time and played bits of 8 different songs for the
Hey.
guys just standing there. Like that's working happy, right? You're a billionaire. You have 14 wives. I don't know how many he had at the time, but he took time, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of working happy. When you love what you do, you just naturally you want to help people, make people happy, right? He didn't have to do that. I mean, he could have told security like, "Get these guys out of here." So that was a day. the morning of, and then we went to that concert that night. And halfway through the concert, he said, "Hey, I got this roadie. He's been with me for 23 years. He's always," and I didn't know that this was staged. He'd started doing this. He said, "But my roadie's always wanted to, he's pretty good singer, and he's always wanted to perform in front of a large crowd. Would you guys be willing to let my roadie come out here and sing?" And of course, everybody goes nuts. And he goes, "It's kind of a religious song, and his name is Hacksaw. So please welcome Hacksaw." And this guy comes flying out, right? Total roadie, all dressed in black. Um, and they did Highway to Hell. And you closed your eyes and you could not tell the difference. It was unbelievable. Billy was on guitar, and this guy was just screaming away, and it was brought the house down.
Yeah, I think that's what happened when I went to go see him with my sister. Just
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just always amazed when somebody at that level in their career, that level of just legendary, is just so down to earth with people, and they don't get lost in that notoriety that they have.
yeah,
Um, and there's something to be said about trying to learn that kind of skill on stage of just being approachable like that, because
yeah,
you're on stage, you're not above everybody. Kind of, I'm assuming like what you did in Vegas, where you kind of went one on one with people. I mean, you
yeah,
kind of had to because you didn't have the material. You were kind of in shock, but just that ability, you're very personable, you're
yeah.
very warm. So I can just imagine you just interacting with people. I think as a comedian, you got to be open to doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I've learned. I mean, there's a big difference between doing stand up and giving a motivational talk, or talking about mental health on stage. But I've learned that the more I can be like a Billy Joel and go, "Hey, what song do you want to hear?" Right? Uh, it's and what I've learned, and I know you know this too, John, and we had the conversation before we started. It's all about serving. How can I help somebody else, right?
Mm.
And when I get on stage, and I'm like, "Oh, I hope I don't screw up. I hope I don't forget a story. I hope I don't have a coughing fit or whatever," right? That's not as good of a talk as when I walk on stage and going, "Who can I reach? What message can I give someone else? The opportunity for them to feel like it's okay to open up after me after the talk, or their
Hmm.
partner, or their HR, or their manager." And when we're in that zone of service, it's magical.
Perfect word. Perfect word. Um, Magical. I think I used that in another podcast. It was just something about what we were doing, what we can create. I think
Yeah,
especially with that, I think when I was talking to the other person, it was about writing specifically in that moment, but just the environment that you create, Greg, when you're out there doing your comedy, when you have to kind of pick up the ball because another comedian dropped it in Vegas,
yeah,
kind of thing. Where do you think you learned that, Greg? Because that's not something you can pick up easily. I think it's innate to most people, but where do you think that comes from for you specifically, where um when you're on stage in general helping people, but really connecting with somebody one on one, where does
yeah.
that come from for you?
That's a great question. Never been asked before. I would probably probably have to say my parents. They were all about service. My dad was a doctor. My mom was a nurse, and they actually took 6 years out, and they became. My dad was a missionary doctor in Hong Kong, so
Wow.
my little sister and I were born there. I lived there till I was 6 years old. But it was always about service. How do we serve other people? And we grew up in a religious home, but it wasn't so much religion by works. It was, how do we help the next person? How do we help people that are below us or disadvantaged? And I've always taken that. I think we need to be more kind. And that night, it was in Vegas. It was overwhelmed. It was like, well, here's an opportunity. This might lead to something, but if nothing else, it'll be fun, right? And when you're asked to do something, say yes, even though you don't. I was figuring it out because it was probably about 10 minutes between when I walked backstage and they started wiring me up until I walked on, and I just walked out and said, "You know what? I'm gonna make myself laugh. I'm just,
I can
when I get
imagine
no one
you
else to
walking in and like somebody drops and puts like something on your belt and gives you, a
do."
mic on your lapel, and you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
That's amazing though. I
So,
love
and
I
I
love
don't know, whether it's innate, but it's always been, if you're asked to do something, do it to your best ability, and and trying to make the world a better place. And that definitely came from my parents.
Awesome. So, I mean, I believe I can answer this next question. So, does it make sense from your childhood, your upbringing, that you're doing what you're doing now?
Yeah.
Even though the path was a zigzag, this wasn't what you planned to do. And I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that at all. I think so many of us, our path is just a labyrinth. But so it makes sense to you that you're doing what you do just based on your upbringing and everything, from when you were younger. And
Absolutely. Yeah. And every once in a while, nobody else is like this, but self doubt creeps in once in a while. And I'm thinking, is this resonating? But I always get messages from people, or whether it's on Facebook or social media or by text or a phone call, and it every day there's somebody who needs to hear the message. Some days I need to hear it. Take some of
Mhm.
my own medicine, and it's so rewarding. And that night when I walked off in Vegas, I was like, man, I would love to do, like be a Brian Regan and go on world tours and stadiums and stuff, which would be fun. But helping people and giving people pause and giving them tactics on how to work happy, how to have better relationships, how to take care of your mental health is just so much more rewarding, right? Because I do mix the humor with the mental health because it is a heavy subject. I speak and I share uh, that my stepdaughter lost her dad to suicide 5 years ago, right? So I'd been married for a year, and all of a sudden this happened, and we were kind of all thrown into it. And she's done an amazing job, but we've all gone to therapy. We've all spent a lot of tears. We've been angry. We've been frustrated. We've been, thoughtful. We've laughed, um, and just going through all that, it allows other people to go, well, if a skinny John Goodman can do it, why can't I?
No, and I love the fact that you bring up and you're honest and vulnerable about the fact that, every once in a while you need it for yourself.
Yeah,
Um, because I've gotten questions as a coach by friends of like, you, John, have this particular issue. You're a coach. Why can't you figure it out for yourself? Like they're just curious.
yeah,
And I mean, I say, listen, not all coaches have the answers, especially when it comes to themselves. They're just, I think they put it in their mind that they want to continue doing the work, but it doesn't mean that they all have the answers. It doesn't mean
yeah,
that they all have it together and that there are no chips in the armor.
yeah,
But I love that you bring that up because I think that gets lost on people where I want to see that somebody doesn't have it all together. But with
right.
that, I want to see that they're curious as hell about working through whatever it is, whether with a spouse, a friend, or friends, or whoever it may be, that they're curious enough to keep pushing to see what they can come up with, and how to move forward.
Yeah. No, I think that's a valid point, especially as coaches, right? And coaches have coaches, right? Because we don't have it figured out. We don't, and what you said, like some people like, well, if you see it in me, why don't you see it in your own life? And my response to that is, it's really hard sometimes to read the label on the jar when you're sitting inside, right?
Ooh, that's a good way to
And
put it.
you're a coach, you help other people, but you have a coach to help you so that you can help other people, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't go and hire a coach that's never had a coach, right? Well, really? Like, so it's one of those things. And when we have conversations, even this conversation, right, we find out that there is stuff in our life, not necessarily our fault, but everybody's got it. How do we deal with it, and how do we help each other with it? I we started a group here in Walla Walla called Men in the Middle, just kind of a support group for mental health. And in the last two months, probably I've had conversations with two different guys in there who've lost their wives. That COVID related, or whatever, they just got up and left, and these guys are devastated, right? And one guy, he said, I've never talked to anybody about this because I think I might have a drinking problem. And and I said, well, how can I help? And he's like, well, do I go to a meeting? I'm like, well, let's go to a meeting. I'll go with you, whatnot, right? And he was blown away that another dude would, offer that kind of thing. But that's just being human, right?
Exactly, exactly,
And
exactly.
and then I called him like a week or two later. I said, hey man, how's it going? Just checking in. He said, well, I'm checking into rehab. tomorrow, so I won't be able to talk to you for 30 days. Right? But he got out of, he went and did the steps and the work on himself. And he said, it's so freeing, Greg, because I don't have that weight on my shoulders. I feel like I can breathe again, all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
And there was no shame, right? Because we're buddies and we talk about stuff in our life. And the more we talk, the more we find out that other people are dealing with the same shit that we are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, that's a great residual effect of opening up a conversation like that, is people hearing that other people are going through similar things or challenges. Or I think most of the time what maybe holds people down, holds us down, is just this impression that we're the only ones feeling this way, and everybody else is fine. It's very isolating. And I love the fact that you said it's human, it's being human. So it's not, it is special, absolutely, but it's not going above and beyond. I just think it's common humanity, and I think we've lost sight of how powerful that is.
Absolutely.
Greg, since I'm a leadership coach, I have to ask, what does leadership mean to you? What does good leadership look like to you? And it's especially great to talk to you about this because you have spoken at different events and spoken to different leaders throughout your work. What is good leadership? What does it look like to you?
I think leadership is understanding who you are and the value that you bring to your team and wanting to share and make your team better. I've had some great leaders. One of the best managers I ever had was at the Canucks, Jordan Thorstensen, and his thing was like, let's work hard, let's play hard, whatever it takes, you know, let's do it. And he led by example,
Mm,
and I'll never forget that. But I think it's getting out of your own way and helping and serving the people you lead. Right, a lot of managers get to the point because they were good at sales and they would step over everybody else to get their way up. And now they're managing, and that's all they still know how to do. They don't know how to be empathetic or have a conversation or a teaching moment. And so I think true leadership is getting out of your own way and helping other people get ahead. And a great example, I was just in Boston at Kaspersky doing the keynote, and their VP of sales for North America, Rob, was just one of those guys. He got up there and he said, "We're so grateful to have Greg. He flew all the way in the snowstorm, and he made it all about me. It wasn't about him. The whole day was not about him or look at me or anything. It was like, we're here to help you. We're here to grow the company." And he gets it, right? He put his people first. He gives them the tools, and then that's where the profit happens. And so I think leadership, and it's not hard to lead people, but there's two ways, and a lot of times people are a-holes, and you can get numbers in and you can only get so far, but and I think that's another thing that COVID has showed us, is that we don't need to have to work for people like that,
mhm.
right? If we're not in a place where we feel safe and comfortable, we can go out and do our own thing. We can start our own business. We can do something else, but we don't have to stick around and be in hostage or hostile environments,
Yeah,
to work and get our job done.
yeah. Great. Thank you for that. Why don't we jump into the book, Greg? Can you introduce the book we're going to be covering, and just, I guess, for starters, how you came across the book?
Yeah, I came across this book. It's Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. My buddy Nathan um, got me into it. He said, I read this book. He has his own coaching business. He's in the real estate space. So he helps other real estates be better, sell more. And he's probably 4 or 5 years ahead of me. But he said, I read this book because, and you probably have this as well too, when you're running your own business, you got a wife, you got a kid, you got a life, friends, whatnot. But when money is, your relationship with money can be very stressful. It was stressful for me. It was stressful for my family. Um, and in this book, Mike really breaks it down, and it's cool. I had him on my podcast. You'd be great for yours as well too, John.
Okay.
But he started out. He had the fancy car and the big house, and started a couple businesses, and he just wasn't smart about how the money was going out. He was bringing in money, but it was going out as quick as it was coming in. And so the basic of gist of this book is how do we put profit first? Um, and it's just it was life changing. I read it. It's probably read it 3 times. But now every morning, I've got 15 minutes where it's profit first. What do I need to do today? Where are my finances? And I never thought to look at your bank account every day. I'm like, well, when a check comes in, it'll be there, right? But just seeing what's going in and out, or even going through your expenses, like, well, maybe I'm spending too much money here, or can I get more for this speaking gig over here, or whatnot. And so it was life changing for me. It's allowed me to not stress about money as much. I still do. I'm not perfect, um, but even because of this, my wife and I sit down Sunday nights and we review our finances for the week. And sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's 2 hours.
Yeah.
But when we have those conversations, because I mean, not only is she my partner in life, but in my business as well too. Because if we don't have someone on board with us, we're fighting that as well, and it's really helped my business and it's helped my marriage.
Yeah, I think it's something we take for granted just because, you know, we're not limited to cards like they used to be decades ago, or to cash like they used to be decades ago. You have instant access and you just swipe and it's that easy.
Yeah,
You have direct deposit. I mean, you could bypass that whole thing just because everything's so automated, but also get lost because of it. So, yeah, I think
yeah,
it definitely is one of those technologies. It's a privilege that we take for granted.
yeah. And in the book, he outlines his way to put your profit first. And when I read it the first time, I'm like, well, this is just stupid ideas. But he makes you get 5 different checking accounts within your bank account. So I have my income account where all my checks go into or directed to. And then every time a check comes in, I divvy that out between the other 4 accounts. So I have a compensation account, which I pay myself 35%. I put 25% in my tax account. I put 10% into profit for the business, and the last 30% is operating expense. So, I started doing this probably 8 months ago, and taxes are due Saturday, Monday, maybe.
Mhm.
But this year, I've got tax money. I'm not going to have to worry about it. I'm not going to have to take a loan. I'm not going to have to go into our savings because for the last 8 months, I pulled out that specific amount into my tax account. And so just that thing alone, I haven't had to stress about taxes. I've had to stress about like, I got to go through line by line and check everything, but I'm
Yeah.
not worried about the money, right? And every time a check comes in, I know what and I look up in the morning. I looked up this morning. How much money do I have in my operating expense, right? Because I need to get a new laptop, so I have money for that. But before reading this book, I'm like, oh, I'll just take it out of the one account, right? And then you have
Yeah.
no idea where your money is going day by day, week by week, month by month, and it's just it's amazing how much those accounts grow. You're just like, oh, well, okay, if I only have 35%, which is my salary, right? But that goes, and then I take that and I put it into our joint bank account, right? So that goes to paying the mortgage, that goes to paying the car insurance, food, whatever else. But I'm not having to worry about that because I know that my business is solid footing because every check it's divvied out and I've got that money there for, whether it's an emergency or, I need to get a new laptop. There's $1,500,
Yeah.
but I've got it. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, that's a stressor that's always there. And no matter how well things are going or how happy you may be with other parts of your life that aren't associated with finance, it's at your core because it's let's be honest, it comes down to survival. It's about
Yeah,
shelter, it's about food, it's about clothes. So that's just that stressor that no matter how well things are going, it's if those aren't right, it doesn't matter how well things are going in your life aside from that.
yeah,
It's going to hold you back. It's going to hold you down. That tension in your body is just going to be there unless you do something about it.
yeah. And he also talks to you about how money is a vehicle, right? It's to get to where you want to go, right? And and I love my job now. And now that Rachel's going to be in college and out of the house, there, I'm not. I'm not worried about having enough money. I'm worried about the impact I'm having. How many people can I reach? Right? It's just it's been a switch where I don't have to worry about money. I can worry about who can I talk to, who can I help. What are the
Exactly.
things?
Yeah.
Excuse me. What are the things that I can create to make the world a better place? And it sounds like a lofty goal, and I'm not going to work make the world a better place on my own. I'm going to make the world a better place by taking care of my family, helping my friends, talking to people like you, talking to organizations, right? And one by one by one, if I can talk to one dude, and he goes back to his organization and he's like, oh man, I talked to Greg and here's some things that I'm doing, we can do as well too, right? That's how it's the ripple effect, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm not
And
dumb enough to think that I can reach 6 billion people.
yeah, but I mean, it comes down to like the conversation I had recently about whether you nail it, whether you get it perfect, whether you reach a certain level of followers across your social media platforms, there's huge pressure that we put on ourselves to see those numbers go up. But at the same
Yeah,
time, if you've impacted just one person to take their life seriously, to appreciate their life, to work for themselves, to get better, that they matter, that you see them, that you're acknowledging them,
yeah,
again, we're obsessed with like influencers and millions of followers, but I think we take for granted where if it's just one life that we've impacted, that's huge. And you're right. When
absolutely.
people come up to you and say, "Hey, that this particular thing you said just resonated with me. I see things so much differently than I have before." Like for instance, I was talking on a campus on a nearby university where I think they had decided to switch from virtual meetings for their students and they were bringing speakers in. They switched to in person, and only one student got that memo. So it's me, the professor, and one student, and she has the students emailing her, "Where's the link to the?" And she's like, "No, we're not live streaming it. You're supposed to be here in person." One person. So it wasn't a presentation to a class. It was supposed to be,
Yeah.
but it was just me and this one person. And by the end, she just saw things so much differently. It was about knowing your confidence through your worth and understanding that confidence starts from the inside. It's not
Yeah,
what people say. Yes, we talked about it before we started recording, Greg, where it's like, yes, you have to network enough to like for your business and obviously taking care of your family, but that it is about that impact. So it's just amazing. And by the
absolutely.
end of the conversation, you could just see like a light switch had turned where she understood what confidence could be, understanding her own values. So I don't know. I guess I'm happy. I'm appreciative that I've gotten to that point where I recognize where just how shifting one person's mindset to
Yeah,
see their own value, what that really means.
yeah. It's absolutely huge, and I fall into that trap as well too. How many people like this post or like that post? Well, about 6 months ago, for whatever reason, I woke up one morning. I just on Facebook, I just typed in "You matter to me" on a purple background, right? So it's just "You matter to me," 4 words. I was like, let's see what happens. Well, 2 days later, I got a message from an old friend that I knew back in Seattle, and they were in a bad marriage. They were trying to get out of it. They had a kid. They didn't like their job, and they were big into trail running and whatnot. And so they wrote me this like a 3-page Facebook message, and they said, "Thank you so much for talking about what you do. Um, I just depressed and thoughts of suicide. I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just go running one day, and there's this one trail I can just run off a cliff, and that would be it. I wouldn't have to bring anybody else down. I wouldn't have all this kind of stuff." She goes, and I woke up this morning and I saw that I mattered to you. And I hadn't talked to this person in 20 years, right? It was just 4 words on a Facebook post with maybe 2 likes. And I'm practically bawling reading this message. But I'm like, wow, if 4 words can change someone from not going through and acting on a suicide, or change a message, or a marriage, or change a relationship with your kid, or a colleague, whatever it is. And you never know when you're going to have those types of impacts. But I definitely save that message, right? And on the days where I'm like, am I making a difference? I go back and I read it.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so simple, it's so easy, but we just need to do it because, like you said, we never know the impact that we're going to have on someone else's life.
Yeah. And it's tricky too, because you post on social media, um, and it's amazing how many people don't engage on there, but then when I see them in person, they share something that, oh, you're my
Yeah,
personal leadership coach. And meanwhile, you never see them engage. You never know who's
yeah,
watching. You never know who's looking at you and following your example. So yeah, it is magic. It's absolute
yeah,
magic just to share something and just catch someone's eye before they try to carry out an act like that or think about an act like that.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just fascinating how much people are hurting and the power of just acknowledging somebody.
yeah, absolutely.
Um Not just cookie cutter, how you doing, while you're looking away. Oh good, that's great. Glad you're doing great. It's like
Or
no,
in
like
a
being
Zoom meeting.
yeah, no, it's like being fucking genuine, just
Yeah,
caring for your fellow human. I'm of your same mindset and background where it's like because of the way my parents were with their people,
yeah,
to me, what you're saying to me, that just sounds natural.
yeah,
Where it is about just helping other people. So I'm glad that we have that additional thing in common.
yeah. And
So Greg,
the other thing is too, it's not about me. All this stuff is not what I've done. It's the message,
mm,
right? Because you can say the same things that I'm saying. My kid can say the same things, right? To her, to her friends at school, and she lost her dad, and it was shitty. It was horrible, right? But she's learned, to help other people, and she's had conversations. She shared her story in front of her friends, right? So it's how do we be more human? You know, we've gotten away from it. It's all about the dollar and the social media. Look at me, look at me. Let's be more on social. Let's get off social media. Thank God we have Yardstream today. But but you know what but it's the one on ones. It's the hug. It's the pat on the back. And when you ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? And people are like, oh, good. Ask the question again. How are you really doing? A
yeah,
good 5 minutes.
absolutely,
Let's have a
absolutely.
conversation. And people like, "Bleh," right? And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
amazing
yeah.
because they're like, well, I feel overwhelmed a lot. And I'm like, oh, me too. We got something in common.
Yeah, when you ask somebody and the same way it's a cookie cutter question, you can
Yeah,
tell when it's a cookie cutter response,
yeah,
where it's kind of like, oh well, this is what society is really wants to know. I'm good, things are really good, things are going great, things are, uh, but you kind of learn to listen for a little more. Maybe it doesn't quite sound right, or that they're authentic in responding, that they're really okay, or
yeah,
not that they're trying to cheat anybody or lie to anybody or put up a facade. I think we're just so indoctrinated just to kind of keep people at arm's length,
yeah,
uh, demonstrate that you have it in control, because if you don't, you seem weak or you're vulnerable, or, any of that
yeah,
bullshit. But
yeah,
that just kind of
yeah,
makes the problem even worse.
yeah.
So
Right.
Greg, what
All the
is
shame and the guilt. And
yeah, exactly. What is, if you could, you don't have to read every chapter title, but what is the kind of arc of the book? How does I think his first name is Mike. How does he
yeah,
lay out that path in his book that he wants the reader to take away the lessons that he's writing about?
yeah. Well, I mean, and one of the reasons why I like it is he's a great storyteller. He has a good sense of humor, but it's just his simple profit first method. How to set up your bank accounts, how to do it every day, put it in your calendar, talk to other people that are involved. But just the small habits, like we do in coaching, right? You want to be a better leader. How do we get there? Well, try this, try this, try this. And if there's a proven formula that works for you and for everybody else. Um, but he also shares stories of successful companies who've gone to be more successful because whether your revenue is 100,000 or 500,000 or 5 million, this this method works. And so he just lays it out and reiterates it. And it's a life changer, and I'll keep reading it. And I tell everybody he was on my podcast, and I'm just like, I can't believe that I'm getting to talk to the guy who came up with this. And he's like, Greg, He goes, I came up with it because I needed it, right?
Mm.
And he's very much like you and I have this. It helped me. How can I help other people, right? And he speaks and he teaches and he's an author, just a good guy, But in our conversation, he's like, I've got bad days too, everybody does. But this whole social media thing, everybody's renting a Ferrari
Yeah.
and a Learjet
The
and taking
highlight
pictures for
reel.
the day, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I and it's funny, some of the videos that I do after I work out or I'm having a shit day, it gets a lot more comments or likes because people are like, oh man, I have those days too.
Yeah.
Versus like,
They can
oh hey,
relate.
let's go, everything's great, blah blah blah, I'm a millionaire, blah blah, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's being real.
So do you think you're gonna, with your journey now, especially during the pandemic, the Work Happy program, you're speaking and all that, do you see yourself writing a book, or have you written a book that I don't know about? Where are you in that mindset?
I,
What are you
I
thinking?
that's my goal. I'm starting to, and I actually I was working on an outline today. Where is it here? Uh, the working title is the where is it? The happiness habit.
Yeah, and um this wasn't, we didn't set this up before this call. That was just a random question I
Yeah,
had, just because, even if people do write about a similar topic, everybody's going to have their own stories, their own insight, their own voice, their own tone to
yeah,
put into a book. People always ask, you have so many leadership books, but all those people have different careers, lifestyles, family
yeah,
stories, the good, the bad, the ups and downs. So I'm
yeah,
just always curious with somebody who's had your experience, and just your honesty, Greg, just the honesty that you share. I mean, I see what you share on social media about
yeah.
your particular days, whether they're good or bad. I mean, it's out there for people to share and learn from. So that's all. I was just curious about when you're going to put out some knowledge, commit that to a book, and leave that kind of legacy.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to follow up with you on how to do that and do it consistently. But there is something there, right? And I think I have most of the book in my head. It's just a matter of getting it out on paper and into a format where it's easy to consume and people can get a hold of it. And I've even thought of, just even a quick ebook would be helpful for people, right? Where they can go, oh,
Absolutely.
okay, here's the 9 things that Greg teaches, right? Put it in a book format to give people who might not be able to come hear me speak or not, be in the financial to hire me as a coach or whatnot, right? Because to me, it's I have this information. I feel like I have the vehicle to deliver it, and yeah, I need to make a living and pay my mortgage, but I'm not gonna not help somebody else because I'm not getting money for it,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you and I have talked about
right?
that also.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you obviously comedian, and then you mentioned your list of the 9 things. Um, I had written I love comedy, and I had written, never a comedian, never got up on stage or anything like that. But I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about, I think, the 9 or 10 things where comedians are, or you can draw leadership or leadership coaching lessons from comedians. And I
Okay.
broke out like 9 or 10 reasons. That was on my last website. I haven't moved it over to the newer one yet, but I'll have to send that. I'll have to send that to you, and you can call me out on bullshit, or if it resonates with you, just
I'll
because
probably learn. I'll probably learn 9 things.
yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, you may learn from the way that I view it. Some of them may make
Yeah,
sense, some of them may not, but yeah, I don't know. I find lessons in just like the weirdest places.
yeah.
Um
But I think
especially
that's a great topic, right? Because whether it's and one of the things is laugh every day, right? I mean, when we laugh, it releases the dopamine. That's that hit, the free legal drug, and it's great. And people who leaders who lead with a sense of humor, laughter, joke, have fun, work hard, play hard. Um, People want to follow people like that, right?
Mhm.
Versus grumpy, dumpy, and get your job done, get out of here. So
Yeah,
there's a
yeah. I
lot of
mean,
benefits.
the way I putz around on here with my guests and trying to laugh and all that. I mean, that's the way that I try to be all the time. And if there are days where I don't have a good laugh, I feel off.
Yeah.
Like that's the goal, is like one good laugh, whether it's at my expense or laughing with friends, whatever it may be. It just I got that from my dad. That's another thing, from our
Yeah.
parents. Or my dad was like always the clown. Everywhere he went, he was always like the center of attention, making fun of himself, putting people at ease. So I have a deep appreciation for that. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. If I have a day where I don't have that good hearty laugh, I just don't feel right at the end of the night. It's weird. It's kind of
Yeah.
ingrained in me.
My dad used to tell me that laughter is the best medicine. I'm like, oh, it's not if you have diarrhea. It's not the best.
What about that, Dad?
Yeah, right. You'll ruin your brand new Nikes.
Yeah, but that, I mean, just your parents having that kind of mentality. Obviously, they're going to discipline you and they're going to keep you on the right track. But just
Yeah.
them having that mentality of, listen, life is going to be full of shit. You might as well laugh, because if you're not laughing, you're going to be crying.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
And,
with
and I
that.
encourage people, when I talk, I put it in your calendar, take 5 minutes every day. And I've done that too, right? And another thing, if I'm having a crappy day, I'll start over. I'll do my meditation again. I'll go golf. I'll take a nap. And some people are like, well, why are you going golfing in the middle of the day? How are you more productive? Well, if I golf for an hour and and I love being outdoors, it's a little bit of exercise, right? I use up all my swear words while I'm golfing instead of on my Zoom meetings. But
Yeah,
but just doing something and restarting your day, because nobody's perfect, no day is perfect, and sometimes you just need a reboot.
yeah. Awesome, Greg. Thank you so much for walking us through that book.
Yeah,
Is there anything you want to share about what you have coming up the next couple of weeks, or anything you want to share about the work you're doing, or website? Or I'm going to share your social media and everything that you've
yeah,
given
for
me
sure.
with posting this. But if there's anything else that I might have missed, please let me know.
Yeah, no, I'm actually going to be starting a monthly workshop, Work Happy workshop, and just basically give away, once a month, 3 ways that we can all work happy and we can be better. We can have better mental health. We can have more time with our family. We can make more money. We can, move up the ladder. All these things by working happy. So you can look for that on my website. But um, probably the biggest message is just, if you're listening to this or watching and you're struggling, whether it's your mental health or your relationship or finances, whatever, find someone you can talk to. Reach out to John. Reach out to myself. Reach out to somebody, because we're all going through this. We've all been through it. And I don't have all the answers. John doesn't have all the answers, but we'd love to have a conversation. And how can we help? And sometimes I get on the phone and, when I'm prospecting, people are like, yeah, no, we really don't, have that issue or need or whatnot right now. I'm like, perfect. Let me give you some resources that might help you or get you through. And then if it does come down to where my message is the right fit, let's work together. But it's reach out, right? Because life's too short, and there's no need to hate going to work.
Yeah. Uh, I've seen you were sharing on social media just like little clips of comedy and just little shorts.
Yeah,
I think that's a great reminder. Even though it's like LinkedIn and we think it's like just networking, just kind of professional connections, I think you need some of that levity just to kind of break up the monotony of all those responsibilities and duties and
yeah,
meetings and all that bullshit.
yeah,
But absolutely, I want to echo that comment where I think that when I've posted anything that's, the latest example of suicide that's in the news, or a study that comes out about mental health, or anything that comes out about mental health, I try to be a good advocate for. And I've always shared with every message,
yeah,
listen, if I may not know you,
yeah,
we may be connected here, but through a different party and not know each other. But if there's anything that I can do, if there's anything that, anytime that I can give you just a few minutes, whatever you need, I think that's not that common, and I think people may not think that I'm serious about it. But the same way that I serve people, whether coaching, volunteering now, it's like, what is it? If I have the time, if
yeah.
I'm not being bombarded with the 3 kids at home or whatever, it's just it's time, it's listening, and the the crazy thing is like all of these things, all of these, the tools that you provide, obviously companies bring you in your business as a
Yeah,
coach, but the way that you teach them in the end, it's like, it's just free humanity. That's all it is.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
changing your mindset, the words you use, the authenticity that you share. So thank you so much for that work that you're doing, Greg.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, John. It's great to be on your podcast and to have a close circle of friends who like-minded, right? Like we want to make the world a better place. We want more time with our family. We want to have good mental health, and we want to help people. And I don't know. It's been very freeing the last 3 years. It's been a lot of work and a lot of happiness, a lot of laughter, and a lot of tears. But at the end of the day, when I hear from people saying, "Hey, thank you for sharing what you share," I'm gonna share, what's on my mind and reach out, and it's comes back tenfold.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's crazy is it's not necessarily about what comes back to us. It's just, we just want to see it impact the community. We want to help
Yeah,
people, but the you keep saying it over and over again, and that's great. It's just that ripple effect, those little acts, those little everyday acts that can make all the difference.
absolutely.
And the conversation that we had was about the book, just to bring it up one more time: Profit
Yeah,
First, Transform Your Business from a Cash Eating Monster to a Money Making Machine, by Mike. How do you pronounce his last name, Greg? I don't want to butcher it.
Michalowicz. Sorry, Mike.
Michalowicz.
I probably butchered it too. Sorry, buddy.
Michalowicz.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, Greg talked about just how, even though it's about finance and getting your finances right, it trickles into everything. It's the foundation, it's
yeah,
our survival, and that's at the base of everything we do. So I think that's a great book to talk about and cover here. So thanks, Greg.
yeah, for sure. No, thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
And if there's anything that I might have missed, anything that I should have asked Greg, I could have kept him here all afternoon. But if there's anything at all, just reach out, and let me know, whether you see this on social or LinkedIn, wherever. Send me a message. I'll shoot it to Greg and get a response from him. He's been so gracious with his time and just his knowledge and what he's trying to do. So I appreciate him and anybody that wants to learn more about the work that he does. So until the next episode, thank you for watching and listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Cheers.